Chapter 1: The Definition of Leadership. Influence. Maxwell tells us one of the most effective ways to understand the power of influence is to think about the times you have been touched in your life by a person or an event. Significant events leave marks on all our lives and memories. When I think about great leaders that I have studied in my life, none have been more thought-provoking and inspirational to me than Malcolm X. Not in the conventional manner, though. As a 47-year-old white man, I'm sure it'll be hard to bridge the gap for some people considering the message he is most known for, but let me try to explain. At the age of 12 years old, I was confined to a group home for boys on the west side of Detroit, Michigan. It was 1990, and I was the only white boy in a group of 12. As a matter of fact, I was the only white kid in the entire group home of 48 boys, ages 10 through 17. At the time, I had never been tainted by hatred, racial prejudices, or bigotry. I was poor, and all my friends were poor. What color you were made no difference. It was a matter of if you were cool or not. All the guys that I lived with there were cool, and we all got along well. We were brothers. So silly things such as the color of our skin was just something that we had fun with each other about, no different than wearing a mismatched shirt or bummy shoes. My first experience with the Nation of Islam came while I was in that group home. A staff member had the notion that we all needed some exposure to a spiritual message. So we got dressed up one weekend and headed off to what we all thought was going to be church. But when we got there, we all knew this was very different. I don't know what that staff member that decided to take a Caucasian boy to a Nation of Islam temple was thinking at the time. Maybe his intentions weren't malicious, but he was certainly foolish. That was my first experience of seeing and feeling racial hatred, and it was pointed at me. At first I thought it was some kind of prank or cruel joke. Why do these people keep calling me a white devil? And why do they keep putting this camera in my face? I sat through about 30 minutes of them talking about me in this way before a staff member told me I should go wait in the van. After being consoled by my brothers for going through that, they explained to me what it was. They told me about their uncles or cousins that were members of the Nation of Islam and how they were just a bunch of bean pie eating, bow tie wearing weirdos, and for me not to let it bother me. I get to go first on Street Fighter, and let's get back to doing what we were due. I wasn't traumatized by that day's events, but I was curious about it. I felt, I'm cool, so why don't they like me? A couple years later, in 1992, director Spike Lee released his award-winning film Malcolm X. This is where I learned about my experience that day in the NOI Temple and the story of Malcolm X, and how he reached the fifth level of leadership, known as the pinnacle stage. Malcolm Little, he was known as at the time, grew up in group homes much like me, until he was old enough to take to the streets and support himself by hustling and surviving off the fruits of crime. Eventually, his life of crime, alcoholism, and drug abuse led him to the penitentiary. This became one of the pivotal moments of his life, where he was introduced to the Nation of Islam, and this began his metamorphosis into Malcolm X and the pinnacle leader he is celebrated as today. After making the necessary changes in his life, Malcolm became a Muslim and devout member of the Nation of Islam. In 1952, he was released from prison and began his journey towards mastery. By 1953, Malcolm had entered the first level of his development as a leader known as the position stage, when the self-proclaimed prophet Elijah Muhammad, leader of the NOI, appointed him as an assistant minister of the Detroit Temple of the Nation of Islam. Malcolm was a charismatic speaker who developed a following fast. Level 2 came by the end of 1953 when Malcolm gained permission from his organization when he was unanimously chosen to be the spokesman and minister of the entire Nation of Islam. Malcolm reached the third level of leadership, production, by early 1954. Through his leadership, He and the NOI attracted a much larger membership and established temples in most major cities across America. The very essence and foundation of Malcolm X's message and teachings were the upliftment of the individual black man, woman, and child. This was done through education and removing self-destructive behaviors such as the abuse of alcohol and drugs, gambling or prostitution, and any other form of unhealthy living. So level 4, people development, of the 5 levels of leadership was present during Malcolm's climb to power from the very start. Chapter 3, the foundation of leadership, character. Maxwell writes, "Nothing is easier than saying words. Nothing is harder than living them, day after day. What you promise today must be renewed and redecided tomorrow and each day that stretches out before you. That's why in leadership, a pint of example equals a gallon of advice." Malcolm X was a drug addicted, an alcoholic, a liar, and a thief when he entered Charlestown State Prison. Through the teachings of Islam and the belief in a power greater than himself, Malcolm changed these things and developed character. Gandhi said, "A man of character will make himself worthy of any position he is given." I myself lived a self-destructive life of crime that inevitably led me to spend 10 years of my life in prison as well. I went in a liar, a thief, and an alcoholic, and a drug addict. I also changed, so I know what goes into that. I know the temptations of falling back into old habits and triggers that can lead you astray every day. So when I hear of Malcolm's change, I admire him for it. I also recognize the value of speaking from experience rather than speculation when you're trying to inspire others to change their lives. It's powerful to be able to relate through empathy, but to understand what a man has experienced firsthand because you have been through it yourself is absolute. This made Malcolm's leadership authentic. He was not asking people to do things that he thought they ought to do. He was telling them what he had done himself. He demonstrated character by walking the walk. Chapter 4, the ultimate test of leadership, positive change. Maxwell stated, "You can't just announce a change, implement it, and move on. That only causes resistance. You have to give people time and allow them to process changes. While not everyone will get on board or catch up, many will if you are willing to help them. Remember, the people are why you do what you do as a leader. How far you can travel isn't the point. It's how far you are able to take your people. That's the purpose of leadership." By 1955, Malcolm X has established NOI temples across most major cities in America. When he was appointed spokesman and minister, there were an estimated 1,200 members. By 1955, it is estimated there were tens of thousands of members. To be a Muslim in the Nation of Islam, there are certain things that are forbidden for the Muslim to participate in, such as drinking alcohol, abusing drugs, gambling, stealing, lying, adultery, and fornication. Employment and stability are goals for every Muslim. The family structure is honored and children are to be properly educated. Through the teachings and structure of Islam, Afro-American communities were being developed. Black men and women were living their lives with a new sense of dignity and pride that was centered around self-discipline. This gave them a sense of courage to stand up against oppression and bigotry. Malcolm X's voice was going mainstream and reaching all over the world. He became the voice and the face of change for black people all over the world, which, as it so often does, led to jealousy and envy within his organization. He was beginning to outshine the self-proclaimed prophet Elijah Muhammad. Law 1. Never outshine the master. Green tells us everyone has insecurities. When you show yourself in the world and display your talents, you naturally stir up all kinds of resentment, envy, and other manifestations of insecurity. This is to be expected. You cannot spend your life worrying about the petty feelings of others. With those above you, however, you must take a different approach. When it comes to power, outshining the master is perhaps the worst mistake of all. By the early 1960s, Malcolm had become a household name. He was being interviewed by mainstream news stations, and articles were being written in newspapers daily about him, things that he was doing and saying. In 1963, Louis Lamar wrote a book about the Nation of Islam titled When the World is Given, depicting Malcolm X on the cover rather than Elijah Muhammad. This sparked much envy and jealousy in Muhammad. Members of the Nation of Islam began to feel that Malcolm would soon take over the Nation of Islam. Muhammad began to show his distaste for Malcolm by denying his approval for action and events that Malcolm had organized. One such instance was in 1962, after an altercation between the LAPD where they stormed a mosque and beat several Muslims and shot one Muslim man, leaving him paralyzed and another dead. Malcolm had organized a party of Nation of Islam members to take revenge on the LAPD, but his plans were denied by Muhammad. Muhammad denied all attempts that Malcolm made to expand the NOI's collaborations with other civil rights organizations, politicians, or religious groups. It became quite clear that Muhammad was stonewalling Malcolm's ambitions. Law 2. Never put too much trust in friends. Learn to use enemies. Green says men are more ready to repay an injury than a benefit, because gratitude is a burden and revenge is a pleasure. In 1963, Malcolm had become aware of sexual predatory behavior by the self-proclaimed prophet Elijah Muhammad. He confronted him, and Muhammad attempted to justify his violations, citing biblical references. Malcolm exposed this scandal publicly, and out of retaliation was silenced by Muhammad for 90 days, citing comments Malcolm had made regarding the assassination of JFK. Malcolm publicly announced his departure from the NOI on March 8, 1964. Soon after, he began receiving constant death threats. He was even informed of an assassination plot to plant a bomb in his car. On February 14, 1965, Malcolm's home was firebombed with his family asleep inside. Law 28. Enter action with boldness. Green shares with us, the world is full of voyeurs, men who despise you, fear your ambition, and jealously guard their shrinking realms of power. You need to establish your authority and gain respect. But the moment the voyeurs sense your growing boldness, they will act to thwart you. After months of death threats, endless calls all hours of the night terrorizing his family, his house being firebombed, and people attempting to place bombs in his car, Malcolm knew they were going to kill him. It's rumored that while he was in the dressing room preparing to address the OAAU, he said, "Now is the time for martyrs," before sending his assistant Earl Grant to make an unnecessary call at a payphone outside the venue. On February 21, 1965, Malcolm X boldly stepped onto the Audubon Ballroom stage. "Nigga, get your hand out my pocket," someone yelled from the hundreds in attendance. As everyone's attention was on the commotion in the crowd, 3 men rushed the stage, shooting Malcolm 21 times with a shotgun and 2 automatic handguns. Malcolm X was pronounced dead at 3 p.m. February 21st, 1965. The pinnacle of influence. If you don't believe in the messenger, you won't believe the message. In April of 1964, Malcolm began his Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca, the most holy of cities in Islam. This is one of the 5 pillars of Islam for all Muslims who are able, marking another pivotal moment in Malcolm X's journey of life. I will leave you with Malcolm's own words from a letter that he wrote home to his loyal friends and family, where I received the message and heard the calling for the first time. Nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in Allah's world by mistake. Never have I witnessed such sincere hospitality and overwhelming spirit of true brotherhood as is practiced by people of all colors and races here in this ancient holy land. the home of Abraham, Muhammad, and all the other prophets of the Holy Scriptures. For the past week, I have been utterly speechless and spellbound by the graciousness I see displayed all around me by people of all colors. I have been blessed to visit the holy city of Mecca. I have made my 7 circuits around the El Kibbutz, led by a young Mutufu named Muhammad. I drank water from the well of the Zamzul. I ran 7 times back and forth between the hills of Mount Jabul Safa and El Marwatu. I have prayed in the ancient city of Mina, and I have prayed on Jabul al-Lafantin. There are tens of thousands of pilgrims from all over the world. They were of all colors, from blue-eyed blondes to black-skinned Africans. But we were all participating in the same ritual, displaying a spirit of unity and brotherhood that my experiences in America had led me to believe never could exist between the white and the non-white. America needs to understand Islam, because this is the one religion that erases from its society the race problem. Throughout my travels in this Muslim world, I have met, talked to, and even eaten with people who in America would have been considered white, but the white attitude was removed from their minds by the religion of Islam. I have never before seen sincere and true brotherhood practiced by all colors together, irrespective of their color. You may be shocked by these words coming from me, but on this pilgrimage, what I have seen and experienced has forced me to rearrange much of my thought patterns previously held, and to toss aside some of my previous conclusions. This was not too difficult for me. Despite my firm convictions, I have always been a man who tries to face facts and to accept the reality of life as new. Experience and new knowledge unfolds it. I have always kept an open mind, which is necessary to the flexibility that must go hand in hand with every form of intelligent search for truth. During the past 11 days, here in the Muslim world, I have eaten from the same plate, drunk from the same glass, and slept on the same rug while praying to the same God with fellow Muslims, whose eyes were the bluest of blue, whose hair was the blondest of blonde, and whose skin was the whitest of white. And in the words and in the deeds of the white Muslims, I felt the same sincerity that I felt among black African Muslims of Nigeria, Sudan, and Ghana. We were truly all the same, brothers, because their belief in one God had removed the white from their minds, the white from their behavior, and the white from their attitude. I could see from this that perhaps if white Americans could accept the oneness of God, then perhaps too they could accept in reality the oneness of man, and cease to measure and hinder and harm others in terms of their differences in color. With racism plaguing America like an incurable cancer, the so-called Christian white American heart should be more receptive to a proven solution to such a destructive problem. Perhaps it could be in time to save America from imminent disaster, the same destruction brought on by Germany by the racism that eventually destroyed the Germans themselves. Each hour here in the Holy Land enables me to have greater spiritual insights into what is happening in America between black and white. The American Negro can never be blamed for his racial animosities. He is only reacting to 400 years of the conscious racism of American whites. But as racism leads America up the suicide path, I do believe, from the experiences that I have had with them, that all the whites of the younger generation in the colleges and universities will see the handwriting on the walls, and many of them will turn to the spiritual path of truth. The only way left to America to ward off the disaster that racism inevitably must lead to. Never have I been so highly honored. Never have I been made to feel more humble and unworthy. Who would believe the blessings that I have been heaped upon an American Negro? A few nights ago, a man would be called in America a white man, a United Nations diplomat, an ambassador, a companion of kings, gave me his hotel suite, his bed. Never would I have even thought of dreaming that I would ever be a recipient of such honor. Honors that America would be bestowed upon a king, not a Negro. All praise due to Allah, the Lord of all worlds. Sincerely, Alhaj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X.